New details in the double murder case that's rocked Hollywood. This afternoon, the LA County Medical Examiner said Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle died from multiple sharp force.
In the final hours of Rob Reiner's life, something happened that no one in Hollywood was prepared to face. The acclaimed director who shaped generations with films like Stand By Me, A Few Good Men, and The Princess Bride, made one last phone call, a call that would leave those who heard it shaken to their core. For decades, Reiner built a reputation as a fearless storyteller, a man who spoke with honesty and conviction, whether on screen or off. But the words he uttered before his passing revealed a side of him even his closest friends never knew existed. When the phone rang late that night, the voice on the other end didn't sound like the confident Hollywood icon the world admired. Instead, he sounded vulnerable, broken, reflective, and painfully aware that time was slipping away. And what he confessed in those final seconds has already sparked whispers, debates, and disbelief among those who knew him best. He didn't talk about fame, success, or the movies that had defined his legacy. He chose something deeper, something emotional, something that turned an ordinary goodbye into a moment that stunned everyone who heard it. And now, the world wants to know, what did Rob Reiner say in that last call, and why did it change everything? The call came on a quiet evening when the world was winding down, unaware that one of Hollywood's most cherished storytellers was preparing to speak for the last time. Rob Reiner had spent a lifetime shaping other people's narratives, crafting heroes, villains, and unforgettable journeys, but on this night, it was his own story that was nearing its final scene. His closest confidant, someone he trusted more than anyone alive, heard the phone ring and immediately sensed something unusual. Rob had not called this late in years, not without a reason, and certainly not with a voice this heavy. Those who loved him always described him as a man who carried confidence like a second skin. Yet now, even through the phone line, it felt as if that layer had peeled away. Something raw remained beneath, something trembling. He took a moment before speaking, breathing carefully, as though every word he was about to say had to be chosen with purpose. Rob had never been rushed, not on set, not in interviews, not even in the face of controversy. But tonight, his deliberate silence felt different. It felt like a man preparing himself for the truth. When he finally spoke, the softness of his voice was startling. It didn't sound like a director, a legend, or a commanding Hollywood presence. It sounded like a man confronting the weight of a lifetime. He admitted first that he was tired, not just physically, but deeply, spiritually. The years had flown by faster than he could ever have imagined. Awards, applause, red carpets, headlines, they all felt strangely distant now, as if they belonged to someone else. Rob confessed that for all his achievements, there were regrets he never shared publicly. He admitted there were friendships he let fade, family moments he had missed, and apologies he had never spoken aloud. The person on the other end of the call grew silent, unsure whether to comfort him or let him continue unbroken. Rob didn't want sympathy. He wanted honesty. He wanted to speak his truth before he ran out of time. He talked about his father, Carl Reiner, and how he still struggled to navigate life without the man who shaped him. He admitted that despite the world believing he had handled grief with strength, he never truly did. Part of him never recovered. Living each day with a quiet ache, he hid behind humor and professionalism. Then his voice weakened even more and he paused. The stillness on the line felt endless. He whispered that he feared he had not done enough for his family, his children, his fans. He wondered if audiences understood what he had been trying to say through his film's messages about love, loyalty, humanity, and truth. He feared the meaning had been lost beneath entertainment. At that moment, his friend tried to interrupt, insisting he had given more to the world than most people could dream of, but Rob gently stopped them. He explained that legacy is not measured by what strangers think of you. It is measured by what your soul believes when no one is listening. He spoke of mortality not as a tragedy, but as a reality every human must face. He said he had always known his final would arrive someday, but he never imagined it would feel like this, so clear, so calm, so overwhelmingly real. And then came the words that shook the listener to tears. Rob admitted he was afraid not of dying, but of leaving behind unfinished conversations, unresolved love, and thoughts he never found the courage to express. He apologized for past silence, for the emotional walls he built to protect himself, and for the people he pushed away out of fear that they would see the vulnerable man beneath the director's mask. The listener begged him to rest, to breathe, to hold on, but Rob's voice grew even softer, nearly fading. He said he called not to say goodbye, but to finally say something he had not said enough in his lifetime. Thank you. Thank you for love, for loyalty, for the simple moments that outshined fame. His breathing shivered, and the line held only silence. That was when the listener understood this was not a conversation. This was Rob Reiner writing his final page. Morning came with a heaviness that settled over everyone who had been close to Rob Reiner. But the person who received that final call carried a different kind of weight, one laced with confusion, disbelief, and a chilling sense of unfinished meaning. They replayed his words all night in their head, convinced they must have misunderstood something. Rob had sounded peaceful, emotional, reflective, but nothing in his tone suggested he was preparing to leave the world behind. He didn't announce pain or sickness. He didn't hint at urgency. Yet the call felt like a farewell whispered between breaths, as though he knew something no one else did. His friend sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of cold coffee, waiting for the phone to ring again. Waiting for Rob to say, "I'm fine. Forget what I said. I was just overthinking." But the morning brought only silence. The first message came from someone in Rob's production circle asking if he had called last night. That alone was strange. Rob rarely reached out to multiple people at once. By midday, the thread widened and the questions grew sharper. Did Rob seem okay? Did he say anything worrying? Even more unsettling was how each person admitted they too had sensed something was different about him recently. He'd been quieter, his texts shorter, his responses slower. For a man who had always filled rooms with booming thoughts and overflowing passion, his silence had been loud. No one realized they were hearing echoes of a man preparing his goodbyes. The friend who received the call tried to cling to logic. Maybe Rob was sick and hiding it. Maybe stress was wearing him thin, maybe he simply needed sleep. But beneath every explanation was a deeper ache. Why call them? Why speak truths he had hidden for decades? Why now? There had been something in Rob's voice that night, not weakness, not fear, but acceptance. That terrified them more than anything else. Acceptance meant the journey was ending. Acceptance meant goodbye. Others began opening up, revealing recent memories that now felt eerie. One colleague recalled Rob lingering on set longer than usual, watching the crew pack up after filming. He stood alone, hands in his pockets, staring at the lights as though he never wanted to walk away. Another close friend remembered Rob pausing during dinner a week earlier, looking around the table with mist in his eyes, saying, "You never know which night will be the last time you sit with the people who matter." At the time, everyone had laughed, chalking it up to age and nostalgia. Now those words cut like glass. By afternoon, whispers turned to fear. A family member confirmed Rob had been struggling with exhaustion and battling an unnamed illness he refused to publicly discuss. He didn't want sympathy and didn't want his legacy overshadowed by medical updates or pity. He wanted people to remember him as he was strong, creative, and full of purpose. That choice suddenly made sense. The final phone call wasn't random, it was chosen. He selected the person who knew his heart best, because there were truths he could not leave unsaid. As the day dragged on and updates slowed, the friend replayed the call again and again, searching for hidden meaning. The most haunting part wasn't what Rob said, it was what he didn't. There were pauses where it sounded like he almost revealed something more, something darker. At one point he whispered, "I wish I had been braver." They didn't ask what he meant. Now that silence felt damning. Had he regretted choices? Relationships? Films never made? Love never expressed? No one knew. And maybe no one ever would. That night, the friend drove to the place Rob loved most, a quiet corner near the ocean, where he often sat alone to think. The waves rolled against the shore with the slow rhythm of breath, like a voice comforting the world. They stood there, the wind cold against their skin, and whispered his name into the darkness. They cried, not because he was gone, but because he had spoken like a man who understood the end before anyone else did. His final words came rushing back, "Thank you." Not goodbye. Not "I'm sorry." Not "remember me." Just "thank you." It was the purest message he could give. While the world had not yet been told what happened next, those closest to him already felt the truth sinking in. Something irreversible had begun the moment that call ended. Fame had stripped Rob Reiner of privacy for years, but his final act had been purely human, reaching out for connection, love, and forgiveness. And as the sun disappeared beneath the water and the sky darkened into quiet, one thing. For the friend, every memory of Rob began playing in a relentless loop, his laughter echoing against decades of friendship, the way he used to stir conversations with a spark of humor or thoughtful challenge. Yet beneath those memories lay moments too painful to ignore. They remembered the times Rob had disappeared emotionally, even in a crowded room. They remembered how, after his father passed, he walked around like a shadow of himself, unable to speak without his voice cracking. They remembered how often he used storytelling to escape the grief that was consuming him. Later that day, a member of the family broke their silence. They revealed that Rob had been receiving medical care privately. Not terminal, they insisted, but serious. Something he refused to talk about, not because he feared death, but because he despised being pitied. Rob wanted to leave this world whenever that time came on his own terms. That revelation sent a chill through those who knew about the call. If Rob had reached out that night, maybe he knew something had changed. Maybe the doctors had given him news he wasn't ready to share publicly. The friend replayed the exact sound of his breathing over the phone, slow, uneven, wavering. In the moment, they had assumed it was emotion. Now they wondered if it had been pain. They hated themselves for not asking, for not pushing, for not saying more. Hundreds of conversations between them suddenly felt unfinished. They wished they had told Rob how much he meant to them, how much he had shaped their life, how deeply they admired his courage, his honesty, his brilliance. The phone sat silent on the table, punishing them with every unanswered second. By evening, the industry began to sense that something was wrong. Rumors leaked online: health emergency, private crisis, final message to loved ones. Most of it was speculation exaggerated by strangers who never met him. But grief makes even truth feel like a rumor. Across movie sets and editing rooms, people stopped what they were doing and stared at their phones, hoping to see Rob post something reassuring. A photo, a tweet, a joke, anything. He said nothing. The friend drove to Rob's favorite diner, the place he visited almost weekly, where he wrote ideas on napkins and laughed with waitresses who treated him like family, not fame. They sat at his usual table corner booth, window view, and ordered his usual meal, as if recreating the ritual would somehow call him back. It didn't work. Memories hit harder in places where joy used to live. The waitress walked over slowly, tears glistening, and whispered, "He was here last week." Quiet, smiling, but tired. That last word shattered them. Rob was always tired these days. Tired in a way only people facing something devastating feel. The sun lowered into evening shadows as the friend stepped back into the cold. They held their phone in their hands, staring at his contact name, terrified to delete him, terrified to call him, terrified to do nothing. Their legs trembled as a final realization struck them. Rob Reiner didn't make that last phone call to burden someone with fear. He made it to release someone he loved from unanswered questions. He didn't want regrets between them. He didn't want silence to outlast memory. What no one around him understood yet was this: Rob Reiner had been preparing the ending long before they realized there was a final. His life had been built around stories, and even his goodbye was written with intention. But beneath all the love and legacy he left behind, one truth remained painfully clear. What he said in that call was only the beginning of what he meant to leave behind. The news broke just after sunrise on the third day. Phones began ringing across Los Angeles with the same trembling sentence: Rob Reiner was gone. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Traffic noise faded. Conversations hushed and hearts everywhere sank under the same impossible weight. Even those who had prepared themselves for the worst felt the shock hit with brutal force. The friend who received Rob's last call stood frozen, staring at the notification on their phone, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to accept that the world was now missing a man who had guided its moral compass for nearly half a century. It wasn't just grief, it was disbelief, wrapped around reality like a tightening fist. Rob's family later clarified the truth quietly. The illness he had kept private had finally overtaken him, stealing his strength and mobility faster than doctors predicted. He had fought it silently, refusing to let pity stain his name. It was his choice not to speak publicly, not to let cameras catch him shrinking beneath the weight of disease. To him, silence was dignity. That choice hurt the world, but it honored his spirit. The friend found themselves staring out a window, whispering the same question over and over. Why didn't he tell us sooner? But answers never come from empty rooms. The funeral was small, painfully small. Not because the world didn't love him, but because Rob had asked for simplicity. Only close friends, family, and those who shaped his journey were invited. The service took place in a sunlit courtyard, with soft wind moving through the trees, carrying the faint scent of flowers. The mood was not theatrical or extravagant, as Hollywood ceremonies often are. Instead, it was quiet and intimate, mirroring the man behind the fame. People cried softly, laughed gently, and spoke words that felt like poetry. Because talking about Rob demanded a level of reverence usually reserved for saints, the friends stood near the back, heart pounding so loudly they feared others might hear. Every moment felt surreal. The world was eulogizing a man they had heard alive just days earlier. The minister spoke about legacy, kindness, creativity, and courage. But none of those words compared to the ones still echoing in the friend's mind. The final thank you whispered from Rob's fading lips. That last call now felt holy, a moment carved out of time and gifted to one person so they would never question their place in his story. Still, grief is cruel. It makes blessings look like punishment. After the service ended, people lingered in small groups, sharing stories. One actor talked about how Rob had rewritten a script overnight just to save a young performer's job. A producer recalled Rob staying past midnight to comfort a grieving crew member who had lost a father. His children spoke about a man who was both strict and tender, protective yet painfully human. They laughed, recalling his jokes. They cried, recalling his fears. Through every story, a portrait formed not of a legend, but of a man who cared too deeply to ever truly say goodbye. Later, Rob's friends stepped outside the courtyard and walked alone under the open sky. They took out their phone, scrolled to Rob's number, and opened the last call details. Their finger hovered over the screen, replaying the memory, his voice fragile yet warm. For days they wondered why Rob didn't say, "I'm dying." But now, standing beneath a sky he loved, they finally understood. Rob didn't want to end a life with death. He wanted to end it with gratitude. He didn't want tears in his final words. He wanted connection. His truth wasn't about disease, it was about love. Word of Rob's last phone call spread quietly among inner circles. Some cried hearing what he said. Some envied the friend who received the final words. But the friend shared only 2 sentences from that night. He thanked me. And he was at peace. It was enough. Behind fame, behind headlines, behind cameras, Rob Reiner had been a man who feared nothing more than unspoken love. That night, he corrected his greatest regret. As the sun dipped behind distant hills, the friend whispered into the evening air, voice shaking, "Good night, Rob." They didn't say goodbye. Goodbye meant an ending, and Rob never believed in endings. Stories continue long after their writers leave. Films outlive their creators. Love outlives loss. And memories, once made, refuse to die. Rob Reiner's final phone call did not shock the world because of what he revealed, but because of what it proved, that even legends crumble into vulnerability. Even giants whisper fears into a midnight receiver. Even storytellers need one last listener. In the quiet of that final call, Rob Reiner taught his last lesson: when the curtain falls, all that matters is who you loved, who loved you back, and whether you ever found the courage to say the words that your heart had carried for a lifetime.